probably go to it 10 times a day, but I've never been enticed to pay for anything.
Yeah, me either.
Do you respect Rotten Tomatoes?
Yeah, I think they're.
Does Rotten Tomatoes give you credits?
Negative.
No. Rotten Tomatoes just gives you reviews, critical and box office information.
I avoid reviews like the plague.
But when you're going through like Netflix and you got a giant pile of what look like interesting movies, the only thing you've got to go on is the Rotten Tomatoes.
No,
yeah, because it's aggregated and averaged. It's not just one person's opinion of the movie. So
check this out. When you go to IMDb, it must be the trailer. It was just playing. It was playing the editing scene.
Did they do a second one of those?
I don't think so.
No.
I'm thinking of Popeye Doyle.
There was 3, French Connections, or at least 2. French Connection 2. I think there was a follow-up, a related one, but didn't have the name in it.
Did they finally get?
There was the 7-Ups. I think that was.
So Merch was re-recording.
Merch was the post-production. Yeah, post-production, re-recording.
A friend of mine used to have his office in the building where Fantasy Studios was, which I think was part of Zoetrope.
San Francisco?
Somehow connected with Zoetrope.
In San Francisco or in LA?
Berkeley,
okay.
Fantasy had one of the nicest recording studios ever built.
Did it utilize the live end, dead end design?
Yeah, it was back in the day when all that stuff was happening, but it was beautifully crafted.
I knew a guy who was a father of a friend of mine who hired, this is like one of these like cryptic stories. You guys will probably build it. He hired the guy who invented live end, dead end. And if you said his name, and his company was like acoustic analysis and design. So they would, come into problem spaces, measure it, and then come back with, how to fix it kind of advice. But I can't remember the guy's name.
That approach worked well with very large speakers when they used to put the big Westlakes or whatever, Altex that used to use in recording studios. But everything kind of moved back to near field, and big studios are now being replaced by home studios.
Chris, did your squirrel ever come back?
John, I've been away for a few days, so I haven't seen it. Don Davis, I believe, is his name.
He was the general in SGI, Stargate.
Probably.
Oh, I loved that.
It's a great series.
One of my first binge watches ever.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and digital production. Our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And in light of the fact then most likely we're going to hear a lot about USDZ next week. We're going to talk a little bit about USDZ in the second hour. What is USDZ and how can we use it today? But more importantly, how can we use it tomorrow? So we'll be talking a little bit about that. So if you've got questions about USDZ, definitely let us know. Throw it into Makana. And if you've got general questions, go ahead and throw it into the first hour. Leave it as a general discussion. It's really great to have, the show gets done by your questions. You are the producers. So ask those questions and make sure to vote on those questions so that we know which order you'd like us to take as we answer all these questions. All right, let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Mitch, what do we got?
Good morning, everybody. Our first question, and well-voted question, I might add, is from Tim Home in San Lorenzo, California. Tim asked, has anyone in this community compared the Usdz Tiny 2 to the Insta360? Are they similar enough that you could choose either?
I'll go ahead, Chris.
I have both. I've played with both. I think that the Usdz feels sturdier. I mean, it's certainly bigger and heavier. I think that there's some, Alex will explain the back-end reasons why the Usdz is more useful with some of the fancy programming.
Are you using the brand new one, the brand new Usdz?
Oh, I just noticed Tiny 2. I am not. I'm sorry.
No, I was just curious. I just wanted to...
Does it have the same advantages with like all the back-end programming stuff that you do?
I don't know if it has the advantages or not. The main thing is that the earlier Usdz are not competitive with the quality of the camera.
Picture,
so the chip itself is not competitive. We think that I haven't had a chance to play with the Usdz yet, so I don't know for sure as to whether it's competitive or not with the Link 360 until we actually get it in the office and put it up against some charts and look at what people look like. The big advantage that Usdz has, the newest one, is that it has OSC control, so open sound control available to it. So you can control the camera with OSC, which means anything that has OSC controls or it can talk OSC can do that. You can think about there's a lot of things you could do with that, if you have that information. So we're excited about that. We're pressuring Insta360 to follow suit, but right now they don't have an open API. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I think the other thing I wanted to say, by the way, this hand gesture meant OSC. That was the kind of universal hand.
Universal. Actually is. There's a.
But the other thing I wanted to say, and I heard this the other day on the show, and I wasn't on the show, so I couldn't chime in. But I will say this: as an editor, there's a lot of talk. There is a lot of talk about, well, you take this camera and you can match, color match it to this one. And yes, you might be able to. But I will tell you that as an editor, if you're going to shoot something with a bunch of cameras, use the same camera. Just use the same camera. Don't say, oh, well, this model and this model are close enough. Just use the same camera. You will make your editor so much happier. And I only bring that up because could you choose either is Tim's question. And what I would say is maybe, but choose one. If you're going to have multiple, choose one.
You go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I think one of those new versions from Usdz also has HDMI out, which would be very big, especially for anybody that's using the Insta360 Live. I'd like to see that.
I don't think that the new one has HDMI out. We'd have to look at it. I don't think that...
Yeah, when we were covering it at NAB, one of the versions of the Tiny 2 had HDMI.
Well, one of the versions, but I don't think the new one that's 4K that we're looking at in detail has HDMI out. So I do think that an HDMI out as a second output would be a big deal. I agree with you on that. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, asking, at Scriptation is an Emmy-winning script reading and annotating app for going paperless among directors, cinematographers, producers, and writers. What is the use case?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I looked at it. It looks pretty interesting for script markup. It's useful for people on the set to have if they want to take their script, take in a PDF and mark it up for. It has tools that'll automatically highlight a particular actor's dialogue. For example, if you're playing something in a film or television show, it'll automatically highlight all your dialogue. So when you're in a scene, it will let you do kind of script supervisor kind of things, let you draw lines vertically down through the script and write, handwrite little notes on it, or maybe type, so that you can mark coverage on a script as you go. The main problem it may have, and it has a means of distribution, is security, because these days major productions are really hung up on security. They want you to all of your scripts come in PDF format to all the crew members that need them, and they're all watermarked with your name emblazoned diagonally across every single page. So, because they don't want their scripts leaking out into the netherworlds of social media prior to its release of the final film. So security is the main issue. And if they have the security sewn up, that would be a good thing. If they don't, then I don't think it's ever going to make any progress in the professional world unless they have it really locked down so that your version of the script can't be viewed or sent or printed or sent to anybody else because they're really paranoid about the scripts getting out. So, but it looks interesting. It has some interesting features that a lot of people need that used to use paper scripts, for that couldn't be done electronically. And then you could have an iPad on the set with your script on it.
Yeah, I haven't seen. I admit I'm not in Hollywood doing this on sets, but in sets in Northern California, I have not seen paper since COVID started. Like it is something shifted there about handing stuff out and everything else, and people wanting to not touch things, and everything here went paperless. And I don't know if the people that we've worked with are using Scriptation or other ones, but they're all annotating everything on their iPads, and they're very well. I mean, the script supervisors that we've worked with that's all they're using, and they've been using it now for years. And I think that it'll eventually take over. I don't know if it's this is the app that they're using, but I don't see any paper anymore. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe it'll work with most of the PDFs I get are restricted when you get it. We've been getting PDFs for the last 10 years or so. But the problem is they are restricted. You can't edit them. You can't print them. You can't do anything to them other than view them. I think you could annotate them. You could write annotations on the top, but you couldn't save them. So that was a problem. But for a while, maybe they fixed that. But, security was the main reason.
Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, I was on a set a couple of weeks ago, and Sasha, our producer, in-house producer, she was taking PDFs and annotating with her little Apple Pencil on the iPad, and it looked again. It's not like Hollywood security. We're doing crap, but it was very useful. I mean, she was able to take all of her notes and take them into post and simplify the post process.
Next question.
From Tim Home in San Lorenzo, California. Tim's back with a question. Can anyone recommend a Telestrator app that works on a PC with the Wacom One? Bonus points for minimalistic or hidden interface.
I have to admit that I cannot remember the last time. Oh, well, I mean, I guess that Courtney might have something, but Courtney, you don't sell your software, right? So the only one that
I was going to say,
the only person I know that does Telestrator with a PC.
I have one, but it's let me see, get to it over the top of. Oh, that's not it.
And you made it yourself. It's not even just that you have one.
I made it myself. Yes. That's what it looks like, and you can hide the interface here. But I'll leave it up for now. But yeah, once it's hidden, and you can draw in different colors, and I think you use the keyboard for changing colors, etc. It does everything Alex's does, but I forget how to hide there. Hide the.
Yep,
but you just use the mouse. I wrote it in about 30 minutes. I didn't spend a lot of time. I didn't spend a lot of time on it. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was going to say, if you extend the definition of PC to personal computer, Alex's will work.
Yeah. I don't know of any. I don't know of any Telestrator apps. I mean, there is a Telestrator app made by the New Tech makes one. That they have their own or there's someone who makes one for the TriCaster, I believe. So if you do search for TriCaster Telestrator, it'll work with a couple other things. It does work on a PC. And I believe it. Yeah, and the other thing to note is that if you are using an iPad, even if you have a PC, I believe that if you have NDI there, you should be able to use a video pencil. That Michael Forrest does. So I think that you'd have to have an iPad, so it wouldn't work with a Wacom One. But yeah, I don't know of another. Other than that, I don't know of which one. Anything else that's there. Telestration has largely been, until we started talking about it here, I feel like it was really something that was used in television. And there's Telestrator hardware that does it, but I haven't seen it. And people have like little whiteboards and drawovers, but usually they're pretty coarse. So until we really got into it here, I hadn't seen it very often. So we'll see what happens. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, is there any benefit to using a DNS-based ad blocker like AdGuard Home on top of a host-based ad blocker security application like AdGuard for Windows, Mac OS? There's a link to it.
Go, Jason.
I can't speak for AdGuard specifically, but DNS-based ad blockers are an excellent complement to like what you think of as active ad blocking. Two major benefits. The first one is that it will block the kind of tracking which occurs on devices where you can't necessarily interrupt the network stack, mobile devices, that kind of thing. The second benefit is that it tends to block the more major kind of long data aggregators because they tend to fail to produce. It's a little bit different than specifically blocking the things you see.
Next question.
Next one in from Hazmut Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa. I've got a 2 Stream Decks 4 in my medical event, one packed up or broke down. It's an SD app, talks to both SDs. Do not use SD app at all. Companion launches in one of the SDs, but not the one that has packed up. Packed up from Companion, not launching in SD. Advice?
Yeah, I've never seen a Stream Deck fail. So I'm go ahead, Jason.
I never have either, but I'll just get some of the obvious ones out of the way. Be sure the firmware is identical, and yes, you may have to download the app again to make sure that it's that the firmware is set up, and then rescan the USB bus after completely removing the Stream Deck app. That's all I got.
Yep. Next question.
Tim Holmes, San Lorenzo, California, is back. Will the soon-to-be-released Telestrator app work on an iPhone? How would you control this with a Wacom One?
It does not work on an iPhone. I mean, I don't know if it ever will, but maybe someday. I'm not focused on that right now. It just feels like a very small interface to do that with. So I didn't really view it as a viable platform. Next question.
Liberty White in Atlanta, Georgia, asking, what is the best screen recording tool for a Mac M1? I recently saw a video that suggests QuickTime with Black Hole, internal audio, and presentation assist, visible screen clicks.
Go ahead, Jason.
I've got to say I'd be inclined to agree. There are some limitations, but it's kind of bizarrely solid, and even was, I think on one of my first or second, post what was it, Snow Leopard versions of Mac OS. So yeah, not bad.
Yeah, I think that it is I'm sorry, I'm a little lost here while I'm trying to figure this out. I would say that ScreenFlow is probably the best one out there as a software device. So ScreenFlow is made by Telestream, and it is very detailed. And the big thing is you can capture the mouse separately, which it seems like a really small thing, but capturing the mouse symbol separately and then being able to make it larger, smaller, it'll capture all your keystrokes so that you can put them in as a layer, so you can have them appear and disappear later inside of it. And so it has a lot of features. It does suck up some CPU usage, and so you have to. So if it sits on top of something that is, if you're doing some basic stuff, it's not a problem. If you are doing, something with a 3D renderer or video, sometimes you can see some of that. Now I capture almost everything I do on an outboard deck. I actually have this little pics that I still record to, but because I just it doesn't have any processor impact, and I can just hit record and get ProRes out of it. But if I do hardcore training, I've moved to ScreenFlow because I need those. I need all the tools that it has related to layering and keystroke capture. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I wanted to point out a little trick about ScreenFlow. First of all, ScreenFlow is fantastic. I've been using it since the day it was released. There's a feature in there that's mine. I've mentioned this before in the past, but if you go into the settings of ScreenFlow and you click this little checkbox right here, start up launch ScreenFlow helper at user login, and then you have to log out and log back in. What that'll do for you is when your computer's running at any time, you can hit, I believe it's Command-Shift-2, and it will initiate a ScreenFlow recording. And it will do so without launching the app. And the beauty of that is ScreenFlow will not show up in your dock. It will not show up in the application switcher, and it will not show up in the menu bar. So it's completely non-intrusive, and yet it's still recording. It'll give you the countdown just like normal, and then just starts recording the helper app. And then when you're done, it will open up the app and let you save the file. The other thing that's nice about ScreenFlow is because it really just records the OpenGL data, I believe, I could be wrong about all this, but it records the data that draws the screen. It doesn't record the screen. Like what Alex is doing is just taking the output of the screen. So it records the data that draws the screen, and that's why you can change the size of the mouse pointer after the fact. You can turn off the mouse after the fact. You can overlay all the keystrokes like Alex mentioned after the fact. You don't have to burn that in. It will also allow you to make the highlighted window larger and gray out the rest of it. It's fantastic. It takes all that data and allows you to modify it after the fact. I absolutely love ScreenFlow.
Yeah, and the main reason that I use it, I capture it with, is because oftentimes I'm doing this on top of it, what we just talked about. So I'm drawing on top of it, so it has to go through my system for me to get it. And so I guess I could try to capture that as a separate. I could capture that as a separate layer. I get it, Jason.
Yeah, ScreenFlow is excellent. It has two things going against it for me. One, they figure out how to make you pay for it every year, and that just kind of annoys me at this point. And the second part of it is that when you capture a long screen recording, because, for example, to Fenwick's point, the mouse is actually just only recording a series of XY coordinates. That's it. That's all it's recording, so that it can be rendered after the fact. You end up with an incredibly long period, at least long for me and my lack of patience, when you're having to render it and change things around. That said, it's excellent.
Go ahead, Chris.
Alex, what you could do is you could take the output of your telestrator and record it into the ScreenFlow document as the camera, because that's the other thing you can do, Liberty, is you can record your camera, whatever camera you select, as a separate layer. Okay, so and then you can edit that separately. You can say, oh, I want to slide the camera in it when I talk about this, and I want to slide it out. Yeah. Because it's recording into the file as a layer. You could record your telestrator as a layer, possibly.
I have two cameras. That's what I need, is two cameras. Then I'd have the layer and me.
You are looking for a telestrator for M1 Max, Ultra, Plus.
Next question.
From Alex 4D Gallner in London, UK, asking, Apple might introduce new rules for their iPhone, iPad, Watch, and Mac stores at WWDC next week. How likely are third-party stores or stores with existing Apple apps? What about plugins and templates?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, in your neighborhood, they may be available this year. Probably only in the EU, because that's where they're being sued for monopolistic practices. So since that's where the lawsuit is, that's where it's first going to be rolled out. The problem, I think, is going to be is whether or not Apple is going to somehow dip into the pocket of the developers that make their stuff available on third-party stores or not, and whether the third-party stores are going to, what the VIG they're going to charge versus 30% for the Apple store. So, and the other thing is security that you got to have to worry about for third-party stores. I imagine all the scammers out there are going to be scraping those programs off of the Apple Store and putting them on third-party stores and adding their malware to them, since I don't know who's going to be checking each application available on a third-party store for malware. If they want to exist for very long, the third-party store, of course, will have to do the same thing Apple does. But there could be many scams, since nobody's going to police them in any way. So I'd worry about that.
There you go, Jason.
Yes, thank you, Dutch hookup apps. Apple will give them exactly and only what needs to be given to them. And as far as broad adoption, I can't say impossible, but just because it's rolled out doesn't really mean it's going to affect anything you do, Alex, for a very long time.
Yeah, the funny thing is that Google you can put your own store on Google. It's just that nobody uses it, or almost nobody uses it,
because it's crap.
Well, clean show. It is. The issue really is that's even Google users who are much more geeky than Apple users. I mean, iPhone users are just not going to be that interested, I don't think. And I think it'll only come out in the EU if it comes out. I don't think they're going to announce it at WWDC. They're all excited. This is not something they're excited about. I think it will come out with almost no fanfare. The only reason they announced it earlier was because the United States was looking at building similar laws, and by announcing that they were doing this thing, it basically blunted. They blunted that legislation. So I think that you're probably going to, and now the weather has changed, and it probably won't be any more legislation or anytime soon for Apple. So their announcements earlier were more of a tactical thing. Whether they actually announce it for the world, they might. But I think what it will accompany is probably a lot of PR related to how dangerous doing that is. I think that it's very un-user friendly. So I think it's very friendly for rich companies who are the only ones that will really benefit from this are wealthy companies. So it's the rest of them. I mean, so this is a rich person's game. Epic and other people who make hundreds of millions of dollars want to make more, and they don't want to give it to Apple. If you're an individual developer, not good for you because it reduces trust in the platform. If you're a user, definitely not good for you. And so they're basically the big rich companies are trying to step on the little developers and the users so that they can make more money. That's what this is all about. And the EU doesn't care because they don't have any developers of their own. and I mean by developers, I don't mean individual developers, but they don't have Facebook, they don't have Google's, they don't have any of those things. So they can make all these laws and it doesn't affect anything locally because none of the big companies are their own. I think the biggest thing they have is Spotify. Anyway, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to warn you, if as an Android user for many, many years and also taking advantage of sideloading programs into the Android universe there, be careful of third-party stores, I'd say, once they open the walled garden a little bit in Europe to let this in. I would, if I'm going to sideload an app that is only available outside the Apple Store, then I would make sure I download it directly from the manufacturer's website rather than from any store that is offering to sell it. Because
and the big
malware is going to be a problem.
And the big problem is that as users, the reason it's really going to affect us is because the Facebooks and the Epics are going to build their own stores and then make all of that content exclusive. So Apple users could potentially be forced to, if they really want that content, could be forced to go into install a third-party store that's less secure because they really want to use Facebook or some of the apps that are in Facebook, or they really want to use, if this starts to splinter, it's not good. It's good for the rich companies who want it. It's just not good for the user. It's a horrible user experience. And so hopefully, this will die a horrible death. And I think Apple, what they should do is put it out as a test in Europe, not try to police it at all, and just let it do what it's going to do, which is rip itself apart in the system, and then never have to really do anything. That it'll end the conversation in the United States by allowing it to destroy itself in the EU, and then the EU also look like idiots, which they are. Anyway, next question.
I just saw this pop up this morning on my computer. Deity is marketing their new timecode slate, the TCSL1, as the world's first timecode smart slate that's syncable via Bluetooth phone app. What do you think?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I'd have to wait to be seen, but whether it's a stable time base coming off of the phone app or not, if the phone is connected to GPS, then it might be accurate and stable. I'd more trust also built into this TC. This is what it looks like. This new TC1 slate is a local Bluetooth sync so that people within 30 feet or so are devices enable devices within 30 feet or so of the slate can jam sync each other just in the local Bluetooth low power area. But using the app on a phone, I'd worry about if it uses the phone's time base, which comes from the carrier. Normally that's synced to GPS, but at the carrier site. So I'm not sure how well in sync that's going to be with a general time base if you want to put everybody in sync to the satellite, as opposed to locally jamming them and running them with local oscillators on each individual device.
I think the interesting thing also is that the price point is pretty close to a Denicky. Like once I get to $1,000, I'm kind of like, I might as well buy a real slate. Like, I mean, I don't mean that Deity's not a real slate, but I mean, I'm just saying, I might as well buy a traditional slate that I know will keep time code the entire day. It seems like something that wouldn't necessarily. The price is if the price was $399 or $499, I think it would be a different conversation. But of course, it's hard to make them inexpensive. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it's $1,000. It's about the same price, a similar price to the Denicky.
I think Denicky's a little bit more. It's like $1,300 or $1,400 or something like
now
that.
These days, an ambient makes a slate too that is equivalent. Now you've made me forget what I was going to say. I was worried about. Maybe I'll. Yes, it's great. It's great for time of day. If it's going to be pulling its time base from GPS, it's great for time of day accuracy. But a lot of people on set, a lot of sound mixers I know, are the keepers of the master time code clock on the set. Like to set their time code as time of day so it runs continuously, but they like to start the day with the first hour of the call so that they know the time code slate shows the production day time, which is not real time. So if you're not using real time, then that might be a problem for you.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, there are now communities of music producers that are using AI models to clone specific celebrity singing voices. If Apple built an AI voice cloning feature into Logic, would it be well received, or would the labels try to kill it?
Code, Courtney.
I think there's going to be a lot of pushback on this. Remember what a big deal Milli Vanilli was when they exposed them? Just imagine what it's going to be when your favorite new pop singer turns out to be just a collection of computer generated bits from other singers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that I think there's going to be a lot of sensitivity. Apple's probably not the company that's going to try to do this, inside of Logic. They're not going to take that chance. There's no reason. There's no upside for them. They just ruin their relationships with a bunch of people. But you'll see a lot of people building things that look like it. Go ahead, Chris.
Milli Vanilli. I met one of the singers from Milli Vanilli. Not Milli or Vanilli, but one of the real singers. It was a woman. I met her on a plane flying to Vegas. Fascinating story about how that all happened.
We should have her on. Like, did you get a contact?
Yeah, Jody Rocco.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Let's have her on.
I will reach out to her. It'd be good. It'd be fun. I bet she's just outside of any NDAs or anything else. You can probably talk about it. Oh, she's way outside of NDAs.
I know. Yeah. So let's have her on.
I will reach out to her right now.
Okay, cool. All right, next question.
Wait, this second hour? Like in 20 minutes?
No. I mean,
another day.
Another day.
Okay.
We'll schedule her.
Because I could probably get her in the next 30 minutes if you're interested.
If you get her in the next 30 minutes, we'll put her on. Like, the USDZ is important, but I mean, we have someone from Milli Vanilli. So I put her on in the next 30 minutes, but we'll just schedule her.
Her and her sister were in Holland trying to break into the music. She's actually still a singer. And she was like down the hall. And they brought her in. It's a great story.
That's great. A quick reminder that you can ask questions in Makana right now. It's a good time to throw those in for the first or the second hour. So if you've got questions about USDZ or questions about general questions, go ahead and throw those into Makana right now. Also remember to vote on them. It helps us figure out which ones to ask next. All right, let's go to the next question. Go ahead, Mitchell.
James Fosseline from Minneapolis, Minnesota asking, a scheduled Zoom update mentions support for name pronunciation in the profile card. Have we learned any suggestions to make this work? Foss like moss, lean like lean meat?
I don't know if we've learned anything. I do recommend it. So if you're watching right now, it'd be great to go ahead and you can put that into if you open up your, I guess in your phone, the little hamburger in the upper right, or your profile on the web page, you can add your pronunciation, and it does help us a lot. So please do it. Next question.
And it's from Bart Gaffney in Economawak. And the question is, suggestion for an iOS teleprompter app to use with Zoom.
There's a lot of iOS teleprompter apps. I have to admit, because I still use computers for my teleprompting, I'm not sure which ones to actually use. Go ahead, Jason.
Prompter People's version, the one that is substantially scaled down for iPad, is actually pretty good. It's not incredibly cheap, but it's probably the cheapest thing they make.
And next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, how do you think Apple creates the annual AR experience for WWDC?
With a lot of artists, like that. Usually when you look at those things, those are kind of spared no expense. There's a whole team that's really working on the AR solutions. And so internally, they're constantly trying to figure out how to make them better. And one of the places that they do that is usually around these events. So it's a pretty robust team that puts that stuff together. There's a mixture of how do you build the models, how do you surface the models, how do you get them into the system, how do you deliver them, what the idea is. So those are typically how that happens. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, the same answer that Robin Williams gave when he asked, "How do you get to the Met?" Money. That's how.
Next question.
Tony Mobley, Noonan, Georgia. Is there enough difference from the iPhone XS Max and the 11 Pro Max for my primary camera going from 2 lenses to 3?
Yeah, I mean, the third lens is, I think when you go through it, I mean, there's a lot of other things in that camera, but the third lens, I believe, is the 0.5, which I love. So the 0.5, wide angle or fisheye, almost fisheye, it's such a great lens, and my kids use it probably more than I do. They have it's funny, my kids have the 12s and the 12 Pros or whatever, and my older ones that I was using for testing, and they know how to do things with that camera that I've never, they have a very specific positions and facial expressions and everything else. If you just hand it to them, they'll be like, "Woo," and they take this very specific picture. It's funny to watch. It's a culture within Snap and within other kids, they evolve much faster than we do, and so they have a whole culture of photos and how you send photos to your friends and all the things that you do, and it's kind of an amazing thing to watch kids with cell phone cameras. so anyway, but I think the third lens, I use the 0.5 all the time, so I'd recommend it. Next question. Douglas
Carmichael asking, one thing I like about the Dell PowerEdge servers is their beautifully thought out chassis design and management interface, the iDRAC. What enterprise server brand do you prefer working with?
Go ahead, John.
I was a Dell partner back in the day and spent millions of dollars on servers for the Dell PowerEdge line. They're fantastic, but I haven't owned a server in 15 years now. Everything I have is in the cloud.
There you go, Jason.
Ditto what Preto said. Lenovo did a fair number of decent ones, but I don't think anyone's ever quite approached that design that Dell came out with after millions and millions of dollars of iteration.
Mitchell?
A big fan of HP, Hewlett-Packard. They look great. They work great.
Next question.
Next question is from James Haldane in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Is there an alternative option, hardware or software, that we should explore besides using the NDI HX camera app in Android to capture a segment of an event, considering the line of sight challenges we're facing with our 3 camera positions?
Yeah, I'm just, using it. Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is if you're trying to do this all with phones, or whether you're using cameras for that. You're using the camera app. You have 3 camera positions, and so I'm not sure what kind of cameras you're using. So that would be the thing that, what I would say, if you're having line of sight issues or those types of things, you may want to start moving to a real transmitter, like real cameras and real transmitters. So a Teradek Bolt or something like it, with a real camera is going to get you what you need. once it's set up. So think about something like that. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas, has a question. What's up with the .ai domain names? How do you get the best deal on one, and what registrar do you use?
Go ahead, John.
The .ai is a top level domain from Anguilla, which is a little island out in the Caribbean. And that's one reason why it's expensive. The other reason why it's expensive is because of demand. Just simple demand.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, just a quick add-on to that. TLDs, there's a lot of confusion about this. Any organization that can demonstrate to ICANN that they have the resources and the bankroll can basically submit for a TLD. And after that, they own it, and they get to decide which domain name registrars get to in turn sell it. That's why you can't get every TLD from every domain name registrar.
Good, Chris.
Yeah, for the record, I am working on .fenwick as a TLD, and it's going to be available soon. I'll keep you posted.
Officehours.fenwick. Another quick reminder, you can ask questions in the first hour or the second hour, so go ahead and throw those questions in.
It's got a ring to it, doesn't it?
It does. General questions for the first hour, or you can ask about USDZ in the second hour. Let's go ahead and jump into the next question.
Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California wants to know, when doing a show with remote TD, A1, and graphics operator, how exactly do you bring these people into the system, and how do they monitor the show? Cutting with mix effect.
You know, Gordon, at the beginning of the pandemic, the first show that I did back in a studio that I work in a lot, it was still like summer 2020. We took apart the control room. And we put the audio in one room, we put the switching in a room, and we literally like separated all the people out of a room. When we did that show, I recommended that we all join a little side Zoom meeting just so we could have eye contact with each other. And I'll tell you, as a director, I really like knowing that when I say, hey, stand by to roll tape, I could see that the guy's hand is like on the button. I even said, hey, can you zoom your camera out a little so I can see your gear? That being said, although we were just down the hall from each other for, COVID reasons, I would do the exact same thing if we were across oceans and stuff. Just open up a Zoom room for all the crew and let them be there. You could put the multi-view in that Zoom room. Everybody can see all the feeds that are necessary. That's how I would do it.
Yeah, it's funny. When we started, we did exactly what Chris was talking about, which is that we separated it all into, we had these offices. And so the TD had their own office and the A1 had their own office. And we had engineering in another office and we had another office for graphics. And we wanted to keep everybody separate. So if someone got COVID, we wouldn't have to close the whole system down. That definitely grew to the TDs or wherever they want to be. What happened was we had a TD not available. And we're like, well, how do we get Nate to come in from Salt Lake City and cut a show? And before we knew it, we had Nate cutting the show, and then we just got used to Nate cutting shows from Salt Lake City. Like it became very clear because Nate, a good example is he's a TD that has a control board. He can tie it in. We have, and then we have, oftentimes Brian Maddox or Mickey or other folks, coming in remotely to handle those things remotely for us within our system. What makes that work is the VPNs. So we use VPNs so that everybody can, everyone's part of the same network. So we use typically either software or hardware Meraki's. If you're tying in a board, it's easier to send somebody a piece of hardware, a Meraki, piece of hardware, so that they can connect to the network. It's not that you can't do it with software, but it's a lot easier to do it with the hardware. If you're tying hardware in, is to have a router that's part of the overall system embedded into that. And then of course everyone sees Zoom. Sometimes they need to see and hear more than that, but typically Zoom. And then also we might use Unity Connect, which is going to be, we use Unity for comms right now. We use or ClearComm, so we have, depends on what we're doing, but either ClearComm with or Unity comms along with Unity Connect. That allows us to send more channels out. So we can pass those. If we're using ClearComm, we can actually tie those channels into the comm system and be able to push those out as well. So that becomes really useful for us to be able to listen to those things. And so those are all the things that we start to spread out. But once you get spread out and you start doing it as a larger group, and I think there's going to be more talk about this on Friday, get kind of used to it, and you're like, why are we bringing people in? And if you have a solid internet connection, you have solid power, we have primary and backup, and you have, a lot of the infrastructure that you need, it works really well. We've done some very complex shows with a lot of cues, with a lot of graphics, and some people are playing it back locally, and some people are remote. In some cases, if it's something new, we might bring them into the office, and there's certain cases where it's harder. Like, for instance, we had an EVS operator, and the EVS operator, we brought the EVS into our office because we just couldn't figure out exactly how to run that remotely, because it's really built to be run by a person sitting in front of it. But those are the kind of things, those are minor, pieces there. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, just thinking, how does a workflow work with that, Alex? If you have a TD and he has an actual board, is it like a ROS with some kind of middleware software, and then you have a ROS at the other end?
Well, we have the Blackmagic. We're using just the constellation, so the ATEM constellation 8K, and then Nate has an actual ATEM panel, and then we have a Meraki. I think for most people we send them a Z3, which is it's the smallest Meraki you can get because it doesn't have to push a lot of data. And once you plug that in, it's just a router, and you can plug switches into that, or you can do whatever you want. But everything that sits inside of that is delivered as if it was in the same subnet. So it's basically created a tunnel that has it act like it's in the network inside the building, and then everything kind of just works after that. And so you just plug things in, they get local IP addresses. Same thing if I turn on my VPN here in my house, I just type in the local IP for the AJA, our FS2s our constellation in the office will just pop up on my screen when I open up the software. In fact, it's a problem for me because I get that one instead of the one that I'm supposed to be using, which is the one here. So it just becomes, you're just part of that larger network after that. If you've got a good internet connection. Go ahead, Chris.
I really have to learn how to do all this stuff. The other thing I wanted to mention was that recently I went back and did about a week at a South Bay company directing a bunch of stuff. And we were in a more traditional setup, rows and rows of tables and people and bears on my, and you get so accustomed to being able to glance over at a gallery and say, oh, he's paying attention, or, hey, do you understand what I'm saying? And being able to see people eye to eye, that the idea of going back to just communicating with words over comms seems barbaric. It's crazy.
Because you were seeing.
Well, because I was at a traditional site, where I can look at you and I can talk to you while we're talking. I can tell, one, oh, he's bored, he wants me to shut up. Two, he's interested in what I'm saying. He sees the humor in what I'm saying. Like those little, thanks, Courtney. Those little nonverbal communication cues that we give people when we communicate with them. And being in a traditional setup with just a bunch of people talking on comms where I can't see their face, it just seemed completely backwoods to me.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I work on so many really large productions that we rarely see very many people when we're talking to them. So it's a pretty rare thing. If I'm on a big event, 90% of the event is on comms somewhere in the building. I don't know where they are, and so I guess I don't think about it that much because we get on comms and we don't. Oftentimes we're barely looking at each other, in our systems because we're so spread out, over a system. So we're not.
I understand, and that is the traditional way that we've all worked. But in the last couple of years, working with people over Zoom, I've gotten very.
Oh, I see. I've
gotten very comfortable with the fact that I can see that you're listening to me. I can see that you understand me, not just over at this. I'm using this old phone, Bakelite hand gesture as comms. But what I'm saying is being able to see people while I'm communicating with them is so far superior than just being over comms. I get it. That's the way we always worked. I would prefer working with people over Zoom.
Yeah, I think that the hard part is we have so many screens up already. I mean, we just don't, it'd be another screen that we manage. And so it's interesting. Yeah, I haven't done that very much. I have to admit that we rarely open up a video window to that process, but it's an interesting thought. Next question.
Christian Cordy from Falls Church, Virginia, asking, Jaron Lanier once stated that VR emphasizes the beauty of real life. Doesn't the panel agree with this sentiment? And do you think that AI has a similar effect on handmade content?
Go ahead, John.
Jaron Lanier is quite a character. I was the dealer for SGI for Southern Nevada, so we would bump into Jaron from time to time. What's going to happen is you're going to bifurcate stuff into there's going to be the generative computer generated stuff, and then there's going to be the handmade stuff, and that will be like Chris doing his little artwork over at Etsy over there, a little handmade work. And all the good stuff will be generated by the AI.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't know. You might look at this. I kind of look at it as CGI in films. First it looks really cool and you really like it, and then it becomes, oh, that's just CGI. It becomes blasé, and you want to see something real again, as opposed to seeing everything blow up and explode and crash into buildings and fall in. So I long for reality again. So it can make you appreciate, actual reality versus virtual reality.
Yeah, I think that it definitely, I think that I find anything that's mass produced, there's a certain value to doing something by hand that people really like. This kind of hand created thing, like my daughter makes thank you cards and Christmas cards and birthday cards. And she literally just buys blank cards, and then she just draws this thing on the front of it, and it is as good as a Hallmark card. I mean, the quality of it is as good as a Hallmark. She's a very talented artist, and I guarantee that everybody keeps those. The ones that you send them that they just throw away because they have no value. But there's something about it that has this beyond just that she did it. It's that it has a certain feel to it that feels real. And I think that there is a value to that gets increased by the fact that so much of it is done automatically. Go ahead, Chris.
I think ultimately what we will begin to see more and more, and we already see it, is that humans relate to humans better than humans relate to machines. And this happens with any sort of handmade craft. If you take the time, you take the breath, and you look at the difference between a handmade cabinet and something that comes out of a computer, in an IKEA factory somewhere in Sweden, it feels different. It is different. It's the same thing with beer, like beer from a giant brewery versus, Preto, your friend that has his own, tiny brewery in his third bedroom at his house. I mean, people like things that are handcrafted. And I think the reason why we're drawn to it, if we take the time, not everybody cares. Obviously, not everybody cares. But when you take the time to appreciate it, there's definitely a type of person that's going to be drawn to that. And I think that it will be the same with everything, always, forever. There's people that love a good, low budget, very traditionally made film over the Hollywood tentpole, Marvel comic superhero CGI fest.
Good, Mitchell.
Yeah, I want to add to what Chris was just saying. I watched John Wick 4 last night, and the body count, it looks like they were just trying to go for body count, which was kind of uncomfortable because you get clenched up and there's no break in the action that allows you to recover and then breathe a little bit and then get back into it. So with CGI making it even easier to do that, at what point is it too much? And I think they've already exceeded that particular area. I'm longing for practical stuff, practical effects, practical battles that have a build up and a conclusion, and it's not just all whiz bang. How many ways can you kill?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times when people say that, I always, talking to effects artists, for instance, what people call practical in a lot of things are just really good visual effects, really good CG effects. The problem is that most of them are not really good. They don't, most of the CG effects fall short because they're just not that last little bit added because there's so many shots and there's so much to get done. And, so people just run out of runway, or they just don't have somebody poking at it hard enough at the very end to get that last little bit. Because there's a lot of things that when you see what was CG, You're like, wow, I thought that was all practical. But it's because they put that last little bit in to make sure the physics work, to make sure the lighting work, to make sure the composites work. I mean, when you look at like how people shoot green screen, the green screen generally behind them is horrible. And that means they have to roto it, which means all the edges are just a little soft, or a little clean compared to what they were if they were, but if you take the time to get that right, it works. Jason?
Yeah, the inverse of that, of course, is also true. If you do have a James Cameron who's just monomaniacal, you end up with extremely old films like T2, where they actually hold up pretty well.
Well, and even all CG stuff. I mean, if you look at Avatar, even Avatar 2 and even Avatar 1, but Avatar 2, man, does that CG look good.
Oh.
Like it's CG, but it looks real. Next question.
Next question from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. Question is, are there downsides to investing in the all-in-one ATEM television studio HD8 ISO versus individual ATEM components?
Good, Courtney.
It kind of depends on how you work. If you're going to marry yourself to this all-in-one, where all your inputs and outputs are coming into your control surface here, because this is what the back end of it looks like, you're going to have a very messy table, because you're going to have to bring all those inputs and outputs into that switcher, and you're not going to be able, if you have to suddenly move your switcher to the right 3 feet because somebody else wants to sit at the table or at the desk, producer or something, you're going to have big problems because you can't move it. If you're using a situation where you're putting it in and tearing it out on a day-to-day basis, it might work for you, for a corporate stuff, you're in a different venue every day. It might work, or it might work in a permanent installation if you're building a permanent control room, but you're putting all your eggs in one basket. And I prefer to have a rack-mounted constellation and the control surface, if you want that digital control surface that just connects over an Ethernet cable. Makes it a lot easier. You can move your control surface around and move it to another room if you need to, without having to relocate all of your cables. So there is a disadvantage in that.
Yeah. I think that the dealing with, the GAC is really the problem. Go ahead, Chris.
I totally agree. Courtney, you hit the nail on the head when you said if you have to move it a couple feet down the desk. I mean, that alone. A friend of mine just bought one of these. He's responsible for building a new studio for we'll call it a South Bay database company. Can you guess?
Are they building another studio?
He bought this thing, and I was like, I absolutely would not have bought it. I mean, if nothing else, if you go for the panel and the rack switcher, you can easily upgrade. You can get the 2ME. You can upgrade it to the 4ME. You can upgrade it to the Constellation. And I think you get to use the same controller, right, for any one of those switchers. And you're just going to run one. I mean, the advantage is cost. I think that's the only real advantage is cost.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think it is just cost. Like, I don't think that you're buying anything else. I immediately write off all the switchers that have all the wires going into the back of them, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, like how do I don't even have a process for that. Like, I don't know how I would manage that. Now, I think that there are some cases, a lot of times those switchers are less than 19 inches wide, which means they can slide out. So if you put them in a rack, you can slide them into a sliding rig. And we do that with there's the X32 producer version it will slide in and out on a rack, and we've had those in the past. So you could theoretically rack mount it and then have it in a rack and pull it out, and maybe that's the way to use it. And I think that when people get started and they haven't built a lot of these and they haven't done this in a lot of places, they'd be very tempted to have it's great to have the switcher in the same place. But as soon as you do this for a little while, you don't want that at all. Like, you want all of your, because you have all the you have the router and all the routing and everything else, and you have everything, in a nice little place, and you open it up, and all you have to do is connect it with an Ethernet cable. When it comes to setup and everything else, it is, and because here's the problem is, you don't want to have people plugging the SDI into the back all the time. So every time you go to a new location, you don't want people doing that, because it wears down the SDI connections. On a rack, we have that, going out to a convenience panel that people connect. So they're all connecting to it. If they destroy that convenience panel, or someone steps on it, or it gets caught in a forklift, or not that any of those things have happened to me, it will destroy it'll pull the rack a couple, like if a forklift catches one of your cables, not that that's ever happened, and yanks on it, it will rip that SDI right out of the thing. And if you had that to a convenience panel, which I did, you just simply, it's like a 5-minute problem. If you do that to your switcher, the switcher now has one less channel if it's still working. So it's like, you're not going to get it fixed. It's a bigger problem. So all those things drive you back towards wanting a rack. And I do not like connecting those things. I kind of write those off almost immediately. Next question.
Christian Cordy in Falls Church, Virginia, with a question. Do you expect Apple to refresh their game development tools, Xcode, SceneKit, SpriteKit, in preparation for VR games? I find SceneKit to be very clunky to use.
Go ahead, Jason.
All right. I'm not going to say just simply yes. Yes, but also the moves that they've made behind the scenes in the last 5 years or so really are just kind of going to come and harmonize and all going to click together. So the answer is yes, but it's not like it's only this time.
Yeah, we'll see an update. I think we'll see what happens. I mean, nobody knows what Apple's going to do next week, but I have a feeling it's going to be probably one of the most consequential WWDCs that we've seen in maybe a decade. So maybe not since iPhone. I'm not going to say ever, because there's been iPads and iPhones and other things, but the last big release was the watch. So anyways, I think we have some, maybe the M1s and stuff like that, but this is going to be a pretty big update. If they do a headset, it means they had to update all kinds of things to make that work, and they're going to keep on building that out. The next, if there's Apple has to play hard. They can't really afford to fail in this area. So I have a feeling you're going to see an enormous amount of push once it comes out the door. If there's a VR headset, we don't know if there is. Maybe this whole thing has been a bunch of hype, and it's just going to come out and they're going to go. And now we have USDZ for Keynote. That might be the big release, which actually will have more impact.
That, by the way,
will have more impact on what we do than the headset most likely in the next 2 years. But I think there's probably a headset floating around in there. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, with their VR AR headset that's rumored to be coming out next week, they're going to have to come up with some kind of application for it or gaming for it. If they're trying to make a push into the gaming market, I don't think they're going to be able to compete. So I think a lot of people think they're going to position this as a very expensive vertical market appliance that kind of like the HoloLens is for the Microsoft side. That it'll have fairly limited application, and it'll be used in professional and vertical market and industrial applications as opposed to consumer applications. Whether it's positioned as a consumer product or an industrial product remains to be seen. But they're going to have to come up with a lot of gaming software that supports it fairly quickly, and I don't think that's going to happen very quickly at all.
I actually think that they'll probably spend a lot of time on games, mostly because games are the number one thing that's worked in virtual reality. I mean, if you look at, for me, for many years, Robo Recall in the Oculus was the only thing worth playing, only thing worth opening up was that it really showed you what you could do with a virtual reality space. Go ahead, Chris. You had something before that.
Well, I was noticing the time.
Don't worry about it. We're going to go a little over. It's an internal discussion, and I've got more questions.
So
here.
What I was going to say is, as a longtime Mac user, I find the period of time just prior to announcements to be really annoying. I mean, it's fascinating to me to watch the language of rumors turn from some rumor site saying, oh, we think, this is what we think is going to happen. And then somebody finds like some minuscule thread of evidence of something. And then all of a sudden, it all is spoken about as if it is absolutely etched in stone. We've said for the last couple of years, oh, there's going to be VR headsets. Haven't we? Have we not? Didn't we not expect VR headsets last year? I think we
know
did.
that they're coming. We just didn't know what they were going to do.
Right. But it's so interesting that the language becomes so certain. Like, wow, this is what's going to happen. And then what happens is the followers start to talk about it as though it's absolutely happening. And I find it really interesting to watch rumors grow. And I think that there's probably been, I'm going to guess, in the last 10 years, there's been multiple, meaning 2 or more, times when Apple was so annoyed at leaks that they probably canceled an announcement.
Really? You think that's the reason they canceled it? I think that.
Okay, when you say it, I'm not specifically at this moment referring to something specific, a specific instance, but I'm in recollection. I think that there have been times when Apple has just said, you know what, we're tired of all the speculation, the rumors, and the leaks. Cancel it. We'll release it later.
Yeah, maybe. I think that, but I do think that Apple has canceled things right before they were an announcement. like if it wasn't the only thing they were announcing, I think that there's been a lot of cancellations in that sense. Apple's pretty willing to not experiment. So we could see a headset next week, and it could just be, hey, we've got some new M3s. Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, a bad announcement could be 100 or hundreds of $1 million valuation drop in the stock.
Or billions.
It has to be right. Yeah, actually, billion. Yeah, it could be multiple billions valuation drop in the stock if something doesn't go right, or it's not perceived right, it's not explained well, the news summary of it, the headline is wrong. I mean, look at all the. I was listening to a thing about how, and I won't go into the specifics, but how influencer campaigns are run in big companies, and how oftentimes the execs at the company have no idea that some of the influencer campaigns are even, they don't know the specifics of how they're actually transforming. And if you look at recent news with certain influencer campaigns going completely south for companies with, hundreds of millions of dollars lost in valuation, I mean, it has to be right. Mm-hmm. And so, they'll pull it in a heartbeat if they have any concerns.
Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, Douglas asks, would Universe behind a Cloudflare tunnel be a more efficient alternative to VPNs for remote production?
Yes and no. I mean, you can do that. There's a lot more setup on our end. And we are definitely, you're seeing that right now. This show is Universe in a Cloudflare tunnel talking to Isadora, which is talking to Mix Effect, which is talking to an ATEM. We'll talk about that in a future episode. But the point is that those, so the answer is yes, you can definitely do a lot of things that way. Would I do a show with a client? Like, we have it all pre-built for this kind of show. Setting this up for an ad hoc, like we don't know what we're going to do next, could be a lot harder. But so it can be an alternative. I don't know if it's the alternative. Next question.
Tony Mobley, Newton, Georgia, weighs in with a question. In the past, I've used ExpressVPN. Is this the same kind of VPN that you referenced today, or is it a different process altogether?
A different. ExpressVPN and Vanish VPN and all those are there really just so that you can move your IP so that you can get access to content or you can basically protect yourself at a hotel room. What we're talking about is building a larger cloud of users that are able to access our central system. So it's definitely a different approach. Next question.
David Brady from New York. Question: does anyone on the panel have any experience working with Sumoski's Sumo Light? Any idea on price point?
I don't. These are, I've seen them on set a couple times. They're amazing. I mean, they work really, really well. I think that they're very expensive. I don't know what the price point is, but they are. When I saw them in person, I was like, wow, these are really well built. I bet they cost a lot of money. But I don't know. I don't know how much they cost. But I don't think that this is not the price point in there. Next question.
From Ian Alford. When you have someone remote mixing sound, how do you send the audio to them?
So there's a couple ways that we do that. One is that we obviously use Unity Connect. If it's basic sound, some people listen to it through Zoom, but I don't recommend that. But Unity Connect, also inside of ClearComm, when you're using a matrix, the matrix has Dante, and we can put we can send via Dante to the matrix, and then it just pushes it into the comms as another channel. And so that works. It's a really seamless way to make that possible, and you could do that also with Unity as well. Next question.
Next question in from Tony Mobley again from Noonan, Georgia. I'm getting another Mac Mini as an ISO for my house of worship. Should it be stacked with my other Mac Mini or kept separate? Desk space is an issue.
Go ahead, Jason.
There's kind of no wrong way to do this. So if I'm moving, this is, you can absolutely, this is a Mac Mini sandwich on my desk because I'm taking it apart. You can also get an under desk mount. This is a studio, but you can actually just get these for dual Mac Minis. And I added a lazy Susan because I got tired of trying to go around it. But long story short, you're not really going to run into any...
Lost you, Jason, there for a second.
Yeah, sorry. You're not going to run into any severe problems, no matter how you do it.
Jason's studio is always like this little, he shows you some picture and you're like, whoa, what's going on there?
I love the lazy Susan. That's hysterical.
It's such a good idea. I was like, why didn't I think of putting a lazy Susan under my computer?
I think Susan would object to that term.
Susan, sorry.
Susan works hard, especially in my studio.
Is there any other? I guess you could call it a turntable. I've never, Susan would like to say an efficient Susan. And I think that's what she would prefer. All right, we're going to jump into our second hour and talk a little bit about USDZ. One of the reasons we're talking about USDZ this week is to hopefully prime you for what we think will most likely happen next week, which is a lot of talk about USDZ. So we'll talk a little bit about the introduction to it. I'll show you a couple things and things to look at in this process. But we will, and of course, if you have questions about it, I just think it's really good to prime, us understanding what we're going to be seeing next week. Most likely is a lot of discussion about USDZ, 3D models, AR, and how they all relate to each other. And so it seemed like a good time to bring this up and to make sure that you understand exactly how it works. So USDZ is the Universal Scene Description zipped. That's what USDZ stands for. USDZ or USD is Universal Scene Description, and this was created by Pixar. So Pixar needed some way to move their scene files from one artist to another, from one computer to another. They figured out a format that would allow them to encapsulate everything. And this isn't just a model format. So when we think about a DXF or an OBJ or lots of different model formats, an STL, they have these model formats carry with them maybe the textures and the geometry, but what a USDZ model will carry is much closer to what we would call an FBX file, which is that it's going to carry the geometry, it's going to carry rigging, it's going to carry textures, lighting, even animation. So all of that stuff can be brought from, moved with the USD or the Universal Scene Description that's there. Now, what Apple did is they simply took what Pixar was doing as USDZ or USD, and they said, why don't we just encapsulate it so that it's easier to move around? So the USD is a bunch of folders. USDZ is actually is zipped into its own little compiled section, but using just standard zip procedure to do that. So that what that means is that it's a nice little file. You can grab onto it, and it's going to carry with it all the geometry that you need. And the big advantage of that, of course, is that it's just a much more compact. It's much easier to work with. And the reality is Apple has been slowly adding all of this stuff to it, and other companies now are starting to come along. USD has become very popular. So whether you're using Maya or Cinema 4D or Houdini or Blender or Modo, all those support USD, and you can use those with like any standard. There's often so many of them, and so it's not as clean as we would like it to be as far as getting in, but it's the cleanest thing we've seen so far to carry that much data back and forth. Anyway, so you have this great file format. And the reason that we're really excited about it is because it means that it's really easy. It's become much, much easier to move things around and to get things into place. And so what we can do, and I'll show you here in a second, is download a lot of different models, whether they're USDZ or not. We can make those conversions. So if we look at this, let me drag this here. So as an example, one thing to note if you're an educator or you're doing a lot of this stuff, there's a lot of this stuff that's available. So one of the you can go to, there's 3D Trader, CG Trader, or there's a lot of different ones that will have files. Thingiverse has a lot of files that are available, and some of them are in OBJ, which we can convert. I'll show you that in a second. But a lot of them are more and more becoming USD or USDZ. Here is this is the Smithsonian. Now the Smithsonian, we paid for this so as taxpayers. And so we have a lot of models, and they have a whole team. And we're going to try to, as we move forward, try to get this team to come on and chat with us a little bit. And they talk about media usage, about what you can. There's some usage conditions, but especially if you're an educator or you're using these for examples, these are all CG models that you can download. So this is not just these aren't just pictures, and they have hundreds and hundreds, and I think thousands. I think it's 2,600, and they're constantly digitized. They're mostly using, and again, they're using in this case, they are using oftentimes photogrammetry to do this. So lots and lots of photos that could get converted. So these are all things. So if I hit this one here, open up this Bellwex one, and it'll tell you a lot about it. But most importantly, if you're in the Smithsonian, you can get in here and you'll see this little download button. When you click on it, you're going to see, I've got a bunch of options here. So glTF and GLB are other formats, but you'll see here that this is it has a USDZ model. So the Smithsonian has been slowly changing from just supporting the OBJ models to starting to support the USDZ model. So if I click here, it's going to ask me where I want to save it. I'll go ahead and save that out. And now what it's going to do is, of course, save that out. I've saved a couple other ones out there. So it's there now. And I can say, okay, I want to show that in the Finder. Now, the interesting thing here is if I just click on, let's see here, pull this out here. There's a bunch of files that I opened up here while I was getting ready. And what I can do is I want to open this with preview. I can do reality converter. That's another issue. Now, this is just Apple's preview. And you can see that I can move this around. Now you see that little flash? That's an important thing that's happening there. When I stop moving, let's see if I can move that back up again. That's anti-aliasing, and that's the one thing that we're hoping to see more of in real time. Basically you'll notice that it starts to, on the edges especially, it starts to but what it means is I can get pretty close to these things. Now this has got, you're always limited still by the resolution of the texture map here. But basically, this is a 3D model that I can move around very, very fluidly. Now I'm using a studio, but any of the modern Macs can just move this around. I can send this to Chris. I could text this to Chris. In fact, I'll text it to Chris right now. Watch this. I'm going to take this guy. I'm going to drag it over. I don't know if Chris can actually show his iPhone, but let's see here. I am going to text this to Chris. And Chris, you should get that model. And when you click on it, it should let you actually have it appear, in front of you. So you can, So it's going to show it, and it's going to actually pop into place in front of you. So now there you go. You're able to move around it, right? I can't hear you, Chris.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, it went away.
Because you went to show it to me. So
there it is. So it's, oh, wow. Oh, hello.
So you can move around it.
Okay, I have to squeeze it down.
Yeah.
I started looking at it on your screen.
So the funny thing is that when it shows up, it will show up at scale. So if someone saved the scale, if you text it to somebody, it will show up in scale, and that's any of the last couple phones will do that. So anyway, so we've sent it to Chris. Chris has it on his phone. He's looking at it. He can zoom in, and so but I can build 3D models to do this as well. And so this is let me see if I can. This is one that we built actually for. Let's see. So
considering it's an airplane and I'm in a small apartment, I don't think I can really do the AR version, but I do have it on the phone.
But you can rotate it around. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then when you start thinking about this, okay, well, it's fine that the Smithsonian's doing it, but the other thing that you can look at here is this is, I'm going to cut to this. This is something we actually built for, Chris Fritchie actually built this one that you're seeing here. But we did this for this company called clarity.io. And this is an actual, what you're seeing, everything on this website is generated not from pictures, but from the model. So this is the CG model of it. You can see it rotating here. If we click on this, you'll see it there, rotating around. Now, what's interesting is all these product shots are all generated by the model. And because it's USDZ, all they had to do to show these things. Now, this is a very accurate 3D model that was created because what's great about working with someone like Chris Fritchie is that, all he does all day is build highly accurate models. And so he was able to build this all out. And this means that anytime this company wants to build a new picture of this, they don't need to talk to a CG artist. They don't need to talk to they don't need to try to figure it out. All they do is open up preview, rotate it in front of a white background, just rotate this around and hit screen capture, or just save it out, and it'll just save out as a new still. So they have whatever angle they want now is all available to them at any given time. Any given time. And they actually made it available so that you could download. Again, you can actually go to clarity.io. And you can download a USDZ model of the. So I can actually let's see if it's going to open in preview or something else. We'll see. Hold on. Oh, I wanted to open in Xcode. Hold on. That won't work. It's a problem with having. Let's see. So I can open with preview again. And so as a client, I really want to figure this out. I can actually rotate this around. And so that is the model that we just saw. And I'll see how this is what I was talking about before. See how it looks rough and you see kind of moire. And then as soon as I let go, you'll see it softens up and becomes clear. That's anti-aliasing. That's the one thing that is really problematic right now in real time, is that it's hard to, because what happens is it renders a higher resolution version and then scales it down to do that. But you can see that there is a lot of detail, in this model. And if I do this on the phone, it will actually pop up at the resolution that it'll actually pop up on my desk at the scale that it was set at. But I can also bring that in if I want to do animations with it. This is what we were kind of talking to here. And again, if you have questions about this, go ahead and throw them in, and we'll kind of cut through a lot of questions. We're going to go to questions here in a second, just so we can cut through some of those before we show more. But if I go in here and I take this clarity node, and I built all the animations for their thing inside of Motion doing this. So, oops, let's see here. Of course, it doesn't work when I do this. I was doing this earlier as a test to make sure I can do it, and now I can't do it. So we'll cut back, and I'll figure out why that didn't work. But what I literally before the show, I was like, I got to make sure I can drag it in, and let's see if I import.
This is why post-production will always be a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Go into post, people.
Yeah. So let me cut to this here. And so you can see the bell, you can see the clarity node here. And there it is. So there's the, so I just imported it there. For some reason I couldn't drag it, but now I can rotate it around. So you can see me able to rotate it around inside of Motion. And the performance is, very high. And so now I can build all of my, this is a 3D model in a 3D space. And so this is what's possible now. And this is not like this is coming out next week. This has been in for at least 2 or 3 years now inside of Motion, that you can actually do, this type of work. And I can, zoom in. I could take my camera here, and I can, go into my inspector. I can, set the properties. So I say, okay, I want to capture my position, and now I want to, rotate. Well, we'll leave it here. I'll go to another location. I will, rotate around a little bit. We'll rotate up like this. Now you can see that I've laid the keyframe, and I can, I don't know why that didn't work. This is why we don't do that anyway. So anyway, we'll come back to that. I had a live demo that worked much better than this before the show. Anyway, so this is the what you can see here though is that I'm able to manipulate all of these things in motion, and I'm able to get, it is a and it's really, very, very high performance as far as, what I'm able to actually get done here. So anyway, so this is the, and I will figure out why it isn't, because I'm on active camera instead of camera. There we go. That's the camera here. So this is, let's see if we grab it now, and I grab it up here like this. Let's see if we can. No, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. All right, we'll figure that out. But anyway, you can normally animate that. But the point is that what you're seeing there is the ability to bring that into motion. I think, and you also see the ability to bring it into preview, and all of it runs at a pretty high performance. What we're going to be able to do, I think, in the near future is bring it into things like pages, into Keynote, into even numbers. I don't know why you put it in your spreadsheet, but you can put a 3D model in the spreadsheet. It's not, if we go back to the Clarity IO, it's not just, the issue is not, it's not just that it is, that you can animate a 3D object. It's just that you can move it around. If you look at that Clarity IO, that was, I can decide if we go back to this, the big thing is here is no matter what I do, I can, if I dolly in, I'm doing a presentation and I really need I'm doing a presentation and I click on this object, let's say inside of Keynote. It's not available in Keynote yet, but you go, I really want it to be, I want to look at it from down here. I want to look at it from another angle, whatever it is. I want to look up like this to show you something, down like this. Right now, we're stuck with images. So we're all just like, whatever image I can load in, or I can render something out. Now I can sit there and open it up, rotate it around. What I've done in the past is actually have things that I want to illustrate for a client built in 3D and put into USDZ, and then I just move them around in preview, and then I render them out of preview. I just save them out as 2D files so that I can bring them in and get just the angle I need to do that. Super powerful. And so it's really worth understanding how, USDZ is kind of, part of this process. Go ahead, Courtney.
Does USDZ support built-in animation to the model? Does it will package up? For example, yep. I know in Windows we have the 3D viewer here, so that these are animated models, and this is a real 3D model, and I can view it, zoom in on it, zoom out, change my point of view to anything, and the animation is still running. So does it support objects like that?
It does. Yeah, so you can. Let me see if I can grab one that
you could attach a walk cycle to a model, let's say, of a man or a beast of some sort.
Yeah. So you can absolutely. Let's see here. Let me start from scratch here. I somehow got myself into a different state here. But you can absolutely save ones. If I'm just going to grab one here, let me see if I can. So you can see it here. If I'm looking at it here, you can see that there's an animation attached to this butterfly, and that's all part of the model. Yeah, so that's the model that's in there. So in fact, I probably, if I found it, brought it into preview, it would probably work the same way. So yeah, you can absolutely put animations in, you can put effects, you can put, a lot of things, anything that the 3D model will hold. I mean, anything that you're doing to it, pretty much you can put in there. So yeah, absolutely. You can have those there. And there are other formats. I think that the main thing is that the reason I think USDZ is so important is because no one else is putting as much pressure under it. Apple doesn't invent very much. what they do is they make it much more available, and suddenly everyone's using something. USB was not used very much until Apple rolled it out. And I think that the USDZ format, because it's not something that Apple controls, it's an open format, anybody can use it. I think suddenly with everybody using it, and I still strongly believe, and this may not happen next week, that when USDZ hits Keynote, there's going to be this massive demand for low-cost clip art, essentially, because everyone wants to have. Just think of all the little examples that you have that in Keynote, and being able to just throw those in and start to push it. I think that everyone will support whatever gets that into that, and Keynote is one piece of that. But again, it's just mostly that there hasn't been an organized way to do that. It's been available in PowerPoint as Courtney's showing. It's just that I don't see a lot of people using it, and a lot of it has to do with even the stuff that's in motion that I just showed, that butterfly. The quality isn't as high as it could be. And I think that we really need to, when we get to a point where we're really producing really high quality CG that's really built for this platform, you're going to end up seeing kind of an explosion of demand. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
It looks like the lights are baked in. They're not movable once you're in motion, or do you have to take it out?
You can add lights. You can add
lights after the fact, even though it's a USDZ model.
Yeah, some of them will have lights, and some of them you can add the lighting to it to make that work. Let me see if I can get a. Let's see.
Then my bonus question while you're thinking about that is, does it respect things like ambient occlusion and all the other stuff that comes with it?
If you bake that in, absolutely. So yeah, you just have to decide you're gonna. So you can see here, if we cut to this, you can see I've added like a little light rig. So that'll take on lighting that's there, the lighting rig that's there. So it's still, this is the lighting rig that I was kind of playing with here. You can see it changing as I kind of move it around. And so it can absolutely, here's me changing the lighting, in different ways of just grabbing that whole rig and moving it around. So absolutely, it's still taking on lighting. It's not baked in. But if you have ambient occlusion, it'll definitely see ambient occlusion maps. It'll see normal maps. It'll see, all of those things are still baked into the system and still react as you would expect them to. The real challenge that we have to see is whether they can solve using, really high processing in GPU and CPU, the anti-aliasing problem. So when you animate them, you still see this aliasing, that goes on because it's not oversampling. When you use it in preview, and if you move something in, Keynote or whatever, as soon as it stops, you'll see this little flash, that flash that I showed there, where it's anti-alias, it's rendering it at higher res and then forming that one frame. I think that as CPU power gets a lot better, we can start doing that in real time at 30 frames a second. Right now, it's not done quite at 30 frames a second, but I think that's where we're trying to get to. Go ahead, Jason.
Well, yeah, and to that end, I mean, if I take, I just texted this to you, Alex. The practical stuff that I find is like when you end up with a perfect force scale of a room. In this case, this is the room that I'm in right now. Right. And you can, without having to know, like I don't have to measure cables because I know exactly how long it is because everything is forced scale. And as far as occlusion, I've pissed it off, but yeah, it absolutely does work.
Clean show. You can definitely, and one of the things is because it's full scale, I had a problem where I scanned a house. I was scanning somebody else's house, and I opened it up, and what was weird is that it will just have the house appear, and I did it in Polycam, and the house will just appear at scale. So I was in one house inside of another house. But if I walked out into the parking lot and turned it on, I could literally just walk around, inside of it. And so I think that's the kind of stuff that, Apple has been, this is why I think that Apple might be successful where other people have failed inside of AR is because Apple's been building this up slowly. I mean, most of the tools we're talking about right now are not brand new. They've been around for 3 or 4 years now and being, worked on and developed. Let's go to the questions. First question.
First one in from Robin S. Kurz in Hanover. Has anyone found an app, 3D or otherwise, that actually exports clean, usable USDZ files outside of maybe Apple's Reality Converter or Substance 3D Painter? Blender's plugin is one, but it's pretty wonky and useless.
Yeah. I will say that most of the work that I have done has been, it ends up getting finished inside of Substance 3D. So that's Adobe's product. They bought it from Algorithmic, and so they Substance 3D is the way that I do it. It's a really funky pipeline, which I'm not going to show today because I think it'll change soon, hopefully. And so but basically, you export out you export textures as USDZ, and it exports the model with the textures. It's a kind of a roundabout way of exporting something out inside a Substance, but it does do a lot of the work that you need to do to make that happen. So I found that to be the most effective at sending out the final models. There are, Houdini probably does it is probably the most powerful texture for USDZ right now. And so a lot of the folks that are doing really high-end work are using Houdini. Cinema 4D does some of it, but it's not incredible, or hasn't been so far. We expect it to get much better. Cinema 4, I think Maxon is paying a lot of attention to this. And so we expect that to get a much better as far as the output. Blender, I think, will get around to it. I think Apple is part of the support group that funds Blender to make sure that there's a free version that does these things. So I do think that USDZ will get better. I think USDZ as the demand. There's this kind of problem with right now. It's like, who's using USDZ? If Keynote and Pages, and if USDZ becomes available in I think it'll have to become available in PowerPoint and Word and everything else, because you won't be able to, it'll be very complicated on the Mac otherwise. And so I think that's going to, as that rolls out, you're going to see a higher demand for those models, which will give the 3D companies a reason to improve their exporter. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, if you're using Google's SketchUp as a 3D model creator, et cetera, there's a company called SimLab that makes this importer. It's a subscription-based, you can try it for free, that will import USDZ. And it supports material support, and it's easy to use, supposedly. But it'll let you import the models into SketchUp. I don't know whether it's a plugin, and I don't know whether it'll support export back to 3DZ, but maybe.
The other thing that's available from Apple is called Reality Converter. So Reality Converter, if I'm going to pull this up here real quick here, and so if we click to this, you'll see this is Reality Converter. This is available, I think, only to developers. So you have to pay the $100 entry fee right now to do this. But this is what it's considered a quote unquote beta to make this all work. But what Reality Converter does, of course, is let you. I'm going to try to open this. We're going to. No, it didn't open correctly. Hold on. Let's see if I can open. This is, I'm going to open exterior top. Let's try dragging this in. So I'm going to drag in this model. It might be not the whole model. Oh, see, this is, it doesn't work for everything. And I've gotten myself into, I had a lot of things that I had set up here before that were working here. But Reality Converter generally, when I open it up, it will, maybe I grabbed the wrong one here. We'll grab onto 3D models. This is let's see, this is going to be, it may not be the entire model there. This is just a piece of the model, but you can see that this is an OBJ that was brought in here. And so I can start to reconstitute an OBJ model into USDZ. And so those are the kind of things that you can start to bring in and convert those out into USDZ models. And so there is a way to get from OBJ and the GLTB and GLB or whatever. You can get those out into USDZ if you need to by going through Reality Converter, most of them. But as you saw right there, not all of them. So if they're really complex models, sometimes it's hard to get that conversion to work. But I do think that, again, there's going to be a lot of pressure to make that actually work in the not too distant future. Next question.
From Bobby Rafferty. In Florida, does the USDZ 3D objects interact and cast shadows in Apple Motion?
I actually don't know. I haven't tried to do that. I'm not going to try to do, given my success rate right now in my demo, I'm not going to try to do it right now. But it's a good question, and we'll keep on looking at it. But I don't know if it will or not. Next question.
Robin S. Kurz in Hanover, Germany. Can you download any model from SketchFab as USDZ? When it includes multiple animation loops, you get a random one of them in motion. Does anyone know how to change or switch which animation comes in?
Yeah, so you can download those. So you can download a lot of these from SketchFab, and they do have the animations, and it does, as Robin said, it will grab random ones. And I don't know how to change that. It's kind of what I will say is that Motion I don't think is designed to send you multiple animations. It's designed to send one of them. And I think you may have to use Reality Composer to pull those out. But I haven't actually had to try it. I'll be honest, I haven't used a lot of the pre-animated things because I don't usually need that. I need them to be, I'm doing the animations. And so I haven't needed to have that work. Next question.
Matthias Utilia from Helsinki, Finland asks, if I have iPhone 14 Pro with lidar, can I scan some object to create USDZ 3D models? What software for iPhone?
Go, Jason.
Well, yeah, the short answer is yes. I used the same one that Alex did, and I ended up doing an entire, wasn't even a house, it was an entire warehouse. I'm blanking on the name of that one. The one that I just used was Magic Plan, and that's, a blueprint that ends up, showing out as kind of a textured white.
As far as grabbing objects, I think that the ones that the easiest one to use right now is Polycam. Polycam, if you want to grab the objects themselves. Now, Epic makes one that is reality capture. I believe it's the reality. They bought reality capture, and then they have a iPhone version of it. Interestingly enough, the beta works better than the release, or at least it has for me. The beta version was a little geekier and a lot more, it felt like a lot more detailed. And it became a lot less detailed, or harder to use when they got to the release version. I'm sure they were trying to make it easier, but the reality capture from Epic is, it's cool, but I ended up going back to Polycam for it. So you can grab Polycam objects, basically you just kind of move around and it starts to grab objects there. It's not super accurate. You can get things that you can kind of throw in there. I haven't found that it's something that I would use in a project. I usually use it as a rough so that I can rebuild them, rebuild the objects in detail. Next question.
From J.J. McKenna in San Rafael, California, J.J. asked, for integration into a product like Fusion 360, what is a low-cost option for capturing a room with a level of detail within a half a centimeter of accuracy?
None. There's no low-cost way to do that. In fact, at a half a centimeter, even at 5 millimeters in a room, you're talking about a real scanner. Not even the little scanner that I use would have that accuracy. It'd be plus or minus probably a centimeter and a half, or maybe a centimeter. If it was a room, it might be down to that, but I wouldn't trust it at a higher resolution. So you're talking about a Faro 350 at that point, to get a room. I mean, if it's a really small room, maybe you could use but I don't think there's anything on the phone or anything that's cost effective that's going to get you 5 millimeters of accuracy. You need a real scanner.
Yeah, that's going to cost what a Mercedes does.
Yeah, inexpensive Mercedes, but in a Mercedes, yeah, I mean, it would be entry level 35 to 50,000, somewhere in that range before you're going to get something that's going to have that. Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Robin S. Kurz in Hanover, Germany, asking, why do you think USDZ seems to have such limited adoption considering who's behind it, Pixar and Apple, and how amazing and convenient it is as a container format compared to others like FBX, GITF, OBJ?
It is because they haven't flipped the volume on it yet. So I mean, I don't think that anybody's trying too hard to. I don't think anyone's trying to do that just yet. So I think that the reason that we're talking about it this week is because I kind of want you to pay attention to it as we look at the Apple event next week, and we look at the PR, and we look at a lot of the stuff that's coming out next week. I have a feeling you're going to see a lot more USDZ over the summer. So I feel like sometimes it's our job, even though we kind of throw it together here. It's our job to make sure that you understand that this is going to be potentially could be a big deal. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I just wonder, how big it's going to be. I mean, we went through the big 3D surge about 5 years ago when, all television sets were 3D and every movie was released in 3D, and people were more interested in creating their own 3D objects and so on, putting them in and stuff. And now it's, at least in the world I'm in, 3D has kind of been deprecated. In fact, the 3D viewer that I showed here, this one is used to come in every copy of Windows. It was built in. The 3D viewer was built into Windows 10. It is not in Windows 11. You can download it. It's still free, but it's not installed by default. So I see kind of a falling off in the industry in the interest of 3D tools for creation. For use in various, products, presentation products. Maybe there'll be a resurgence if Apple is able to produce a consumer-priced 3D VR, AR goggle that would bring attention back to the 3D world. It might generate some excitement in it, but I don't know. I think 3D is come and gone again, as it does every 10 or 15 years.
I think that there's been a couple things, and I want to distinguish between stereo 3D and 3D objects, because those are two different worlds. So one of the things that's come and gone a couple times is obviously seen in 3D. I mean, I think I just found these. I have these red blue, really nice ones. These red blue glasses here that I use, and so I keep these. The reason that they're so easy for me to grab onto is because they're sitting on my desk, and the reason they're sitting on my desk is that when I use Metashape, when I use Metashape, it has a 3D mode, and so when I'm working in the objects, I can throw this on and look at a 3D object, and it's in 3D while I'm working on it. And it's the old-fashioned red blue. It's just really easy to set up, and it works really well. So anyway, I still, there we go. Sean's got some too, and so I still use the red blue, and that's been used since the 50s. And so in the 50s, we got really excited about it, and then we got unexcited about it, and then we got excited, and then James Cameron brought it up, and then we got excited about it again with Avatar, and then we lost it. And a lot of times, I think it has to do with people doing bad 3D, And so I think that if every movie looked like Avatar in 3D, more people would be excited about it. And people got excited about it. They wanted to see in 3D, and then Hollywood was like, let's take all old films that were shot in 2D and put them on 3D cards and make it all look. And there was a huge conversion. Everyone's trying to jump into it. Same thing. I think the same problem that Atmos is having right now is that everyone gets excited. Apple got people excited about, surround music, and then everyone just started converting, and a lot of it isn't very good. And as a result, you're kind of like, well, I don't know if this is really going to work. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I might point out this 3D device from 100 years ago. So in the 20s, there was a surge in 3D viewing devices, the Stereopticon. And so, it comes and goes as far. Look, he's got one right there.
I love 3D. So, so there's the Opticon. It was, Dom Camaracha got it, sent it to me a long time ago.
AKA anyway, blinders for humans.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, but I think that I think that USDZ is. I think that 3D, even though it is been slow, I think that when you see it really work, you're like, oh, this is going to go somewhere eventually. One of the big problems is content generation. So being able to build the content for it is hard. And I think that slows things down a fair bit as it works. But I think that also, the tools that are there, like right now, if I look at stuff on Amazon, if I'm looking for furniture on Amazon, and it's kind of hidden, and I feel like they're waiting for something, because Amazon had a lot of artists building 3D objects. And if you go into Amazon and there's some of their most sold things, if you're on your phone, it won't even show up if you're on desktop, but if you're on your phone, it'll go, hey, would you like to see this? And it's like hidden in a corner, and you hit it and boom, there is a chair or a shelf at scale that just pops into your room. And it does a pretty good job of finding the walls and everything else, especially with an iPhone, and finding the walls and the corners, and you just set it up there and you can move it around and see what it looks like. And it's pretty good, and And I'm always kind of amazed that it hasn't really turned on. And we've been building ideas around this for 25 years. So I do see why Courtney is somewhat, unsure about the viability of this process. But I will say that when it works so well. The product itself is so good that I just feel like there's a wanting to happen. I do think that it being available in Keynote, and I think there's two pieces of it. One, being available in Keynote, and two, people getting aggressive about the model cost. So right now, people have, a model is anywhere from $5 or $10 all the way up to $150 for the model or thousands of dollars for the model. When someone starts going, hey, I could build clip art, I can give you 25 objects for $10. And it's available in that model format, will work in PowerPoint and in Keynote and potentially in slides. When that happens, the people who do that first will probably not have to work anymore. like they're going to make a lot of money. And it's a weird thing that suddenly there'll be a lot of money to be made because I think there's a lot of demand at a certain cost, and the cost right now is too high. And if it drops below that cost, it will explode. But all the model, that whole business model that TurboSquid lives on, will evaporate in a matter of a couple of years. Like I would not want to be a stockholder in TurboSquid because I think that whole thing will just flip, and I don't think that TurboSquid will be able to shift because of the way their business model works. Next question.
Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. Here's a question. It's a USDZ file an entity in an application, or does it act like a plugin, like Final Cut Pro, Effects, or Audio?
Yeah, you can actually save this out. I'm probably not going to be able to. I'm a little hesitant to try to do a lot more of this right now, but you can convert that and save it out to as an effect source in Final Cut. So you can build something in Motion. You can't right now import models directly into Final Cut, but you can import them into Motion, save them out as an effect, and bring them into Final Cut. And of course, like everything else, have the things that you want to control in Final Cut, or you can set those inside of Motion to make that possible. So that is I think that it's pretty powerful, and I think that I still think that Motion and Final Cut are going to become content generation tools I think that's why Apple's not that worried about what everybody else is doing with their NLEs. I think you need that content creation tools. Apple needs to have that control, and I think that they're about to use those, and I think we're going to see probably some updates there. Next question.
Chris Fritchie from Tomball, Texas is here with a question. USDZ will really take off once Apple lifts that 47 megabyte file limit for the phone. Any idea if and when that might happen? I'd like to think modern phones could easily handle 1 gigabyte.
Yeah. I think that Chris is right. We ran into that limit quite a few times, and it's mostly around textures, I believe. And it hopefully Apple will release that. It feels like a very arbitrary limit. I think that they're trying to be backwards compatible with smaller phones and everything else. But I think Chris is absolutely right that the phone now, the processor, is capable of far more data. So sending a 200 or 300 meg file or even a gig file, I think you could do that. Of course, it's going to use up a lot of people's. It might be you can only download over Wi-Fi, that kind of thing, because use up people's transfer. I think that might also be why Apple is a little careful to not do that for everything. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think maybe when they removed any type of removable media from their phones, so there's no SD cards, micro SD cards that you can plug into phones in the Apple lines anymore. Maybe that's why they limited it to 47 megabytes, because you have a finite amount of memory in that phone. You're going to fill it up pretty quickly if you're downloading a lot of 3D up.
Yeah, hopefully that'll get fixed. Next question.
Eduardo Augustine from Panama asking, can I scan my home with an iPhone to create a blueprint or measurement of my space?
Go, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. You just saw it, and that was Magic Plan. You do have to pay for it if you want it to be even remotely usable. But yes, absolutely, it'll work really well. Clean your lenses.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, would an Apple Silicon Mac be required for acceptable performance with USDZ models and Final Cut, Keynote, etc.?
It works pretty well. I mean, it depends on how heavy the model, but it works pretty well even on older. The one that I started doing, the one that I did all that production with, that clarity in Motion, I did all of that on a 2017 iMac, not even an iMac Pro, but a 2017 iMac, pretty loaded, but nothing special. So 32 gigs of RAM, 6-year-old computer now, and it worked fine. So it definitely doesn't need the M1. Of course, the M1 works better. Next question.
Kyle Hammond from Chicago, Illinois. You have mentioned in the past that there is or will be a growing business opportunity in churning out USDZ models for money. What is the market that will be buying those models?
I think if you have to look at what those markets are, but what's the market that buys clip art, for those kinds of things. And so I think that educators, corporate presenters, people who want to, add salespeople are going to be interested in adding those things. I think some of them are going to be added as a service. I think that, a lot of sales folks, when they see that they could have their object and show it to a client sitting on a desk, they get pretty excited about a custom version of that. But being able to do it inside of Keynote and just having, I want to talk about a telephone and I have a phone. But the problem is you're always like trying to find the right clip art and what angle can I put it in and how can I turn this around when I can just grab a 3D. Once people start building photoreal or slightly kind of smoothie kind of photoreal, kind of like a, just something that's kind of an object there. When they start doing those things and exporting those out, I think you're going to find a lot of people just love the idea of not using photographs and being able to throw an object in, rotate it around to where I need it, and then being able to drop it into it. Even if I'm never going to rotate it around in a conversation, I want to be able to rotate around. Most of the biggest problems that we have right now is that almost every object that you download from TurboSquid and other things needs heavy cleaning before it's really usable for that kind of thing. And so that's, usually folks like us use those as reference material, and then we rebuild huge chunks of them because they're just not good enough by themselves. And so I think that, to make this work, you're going to have people who are, building them at a higher level. Go ahead, Courtney.
And I think also because of the increase in popularity of 3D printing, this has generated a surge in the availability of 3D models, especially like Thingiverse and the open source model stores that are out there where you can buy or download for free a lot of 3D models designed for practical world stuff for 3D printing. Besides the CGI aspect like TurboSquid uses for 3D content creation of media rather than 3D objects for printing.
And some of the folks that I know that Keynote is a good example of a company that embraced SketchUp and built I think all their lights were built. I think it was Keynote that actually built them, but somebody built all of the Keynote lights were available in SketchUp, and they had all the little controls that SketchUp allows for. So hinging and, all the pivots and everything else were all kind of built into it. And it really, for a while, it was really like why we bought. We would sketch everything out in Keynote because, in Keynote flows, because we could just, in SketchUp, we were just laying out our scenes and it was the easiest lights to get in there. And then once they were in there, you were like, oh, I'm going to use those. And so I think that there's going to be more and more folks that are making versions of 3D models of it. And again, when you get down to training, we built, Alan, who was on last week, we built a high resolution of a Sound Devices 442 this is how long we've been doing this, almost 20 years ago. I think it was maybe 18 years ago or something like that we built one to build training. Now the problem was it still took a little too much time, but the idea that I could do, when you think about motion and you think about Final Cut, the idea that I could rotate around, do call outs like this is what this does, and this is what this does, and this is what this does. I think that you're going to end up with a different kind of training manual in the not too distant future. And right now, the one that would be the most, that potentially could have the best tools to do that would be something like Pages if they added it to it, because it just has all the interactive tools already built in. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens there. Next question.
From Mickey Makachor in Manila, Philippines. Mickey asks, will there be a future of funny 3D GIFs? I'm so excited.
Yeah. So the funny thing about the funny GIFs is that there's a company called Anarch. Anarch now is part of NVIDIA, I think, and they build these really high-end analyzation tools for 3D and everything else. Anyway, I used to work for Anarch. I was the first art director there, and we had a game called Galapagos that I built a little character and all the levels and everything else. And one of the things that they did to make money, and like between when Galapagos came out, and they have this thing called Leveler, and then that turned into what they're doing now. I think in kind of a roundabout way. When they between that, they built a 3D GIF maker thing, and this is probably 25 years ago, that they built this little thing that built little 3D GIFs, and you can throw little odd things on. I can't even remember what it was called, but it would just generate little 3D GIFs, and they were a lot of fun. I definitely think you'll end up with a GIF maker. Next question.
Matthias Utila from Helsinki, Finland, asking, I remember receiving a model of a car, and when opened, I could watch it through phone camera in my living room. Was that possibly a USDZ file? And what are the requirements to display 3D models in real space within the phone?
Yeah, it probably was. And it is something that is relatively easy to just, if you have it there, you move your phone around a little bit. On the Android side, they just use parallax. So you just move the camera, it just calculates what it needs to calculate based on the movement of the camera. On the Apple side, they either use parallax or they use lidar or they use a little bit of both to figure out the scale and position, and then they drop it in there. And oftentimes you can move it around, you can scale it up and down. And again, this is where you could get through a lot more. And again, the goggles then take on another layer of detail that you can throw things on, walk things around. One of the things, the HoloLens has been really popular in AEC, architectural engineering and construction, because you can take lidar scans and you can put the HoloLens on and walk through, like, this is where it's at, this is where it was yesterday, kind of thing, and this is where the builds are, and it's pretty impressive. Next question.
Dave Troutman, Edmonton, Canada. Sorry. When I think of at scale for models, I see this being popular with engineering and architecture. Or is there another hobby level aspect to learn modeling?
Yeah, go, Jason.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of everywhere. This is one of these things where there is a practical part, but there's also an artistic part. The WWDC thing, this is their experience. There it is, a bubble in space. I can put my hand on it. It's just neat.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, as I pointed out earlier, 3D printing is now coming into the consumer world, and the latest set of 3D printers, I just got mine a week ago, the K1, have speeded up the 3D printing, the additive 3D printing process. So there's a huge thirst once you get a 3D printer and can turn out real world objects. There's a host of there's a great need for creating those 3D objects. So as more and more, as that hobbyist device moves more and more into the real world, you'll see more and more of a desire for the tools to create 3D objects, I think, that can be turned into real 3D objects using 3D printers.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
When we did OH Space Rocket, I did a USDZ model. Fritchie did the OBJ, and then I converted it into USDZ. And then I was able to take it into the pub where it sits right now, and then shown the owner of the pub where we were going to put it in this bar. It worked out great.
Yeah, and we've done a lot of things where, I think that it's a little different on the phone, but you can wander around. So one of the things I built is I took parts of was in Angkor Wat in Cambodia, and I shot a bunch of photos, and I created a 3D model of those photos. And then what I was able to do is I can walk as if I was there and walk through it in fair amount of detail. And it's pretty impressive, and so being able to tour things, tourism, imagine, especially if you're going to spend a lot of money going somewhere. Now it's so much money to go anywhere. Every time I travel, it's not a business trip, I'm like, how does anyone do this? If I'm going to go to a castle or I'm going to go to a place that I want to see, I would love to download an app and be able to go out and tour it and learn a lot about it before I get there, so that I can just, so that I get the most out of that trip, because I paid a lot of money to get there. I think that we're going to see more and more of these types of things as we move forward. All right, well, there we go. Great job to the producers for asking all those questions, keeping the conversation going. I wasn't sure whether USDZ was going to hold up for a whole hour, but I wanted to cover it anyway because I think it's important to what we're about to see and what we're going to be doing. So thanks for keeping that moving forward, and great questions in the first hour. Thanks to the panel. Can't do this without you. And just a lot of great answers, a lot of great conversation today. I still don't get tired of it every day getting in here. Sometimes I get here right before. You don't see this on the other side, but I think everybody worries that when we get to about 40 seconds or 30 seconds and I haven't turned my camera on, everyone's like, what are we going to do next? And anyway, so I sometimes see the stress, but I'm here and I enjoy it. And the panel came up under and had made a great show again, as always. So thank you so much for your contribution, and thanks to the incredible team on the back end, who is just making this all happen. This is the development team, this is the production team, the organizational team. There's so many people that are necessary for the show to run the way it is, and we just really appreciate your contribution. A quick announcement: we are going to move our volunteer meetings, which are usually the first Saturday. We're going to move them to the second Saturday. We've got a lot of conflicts coming up on first Saturdays. I realized we're going to move it because of this Saturday, but then I realized that it's actually every Saturday for the next 4 months I've got conflicts, and so we're going to move that. Yeah, Mitchell, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just want to remind folks the show workshop that we give you an opportunity to practice being a panelist and a reader and any type of participant. It's at 3 p.m. Eastern, 6 Eastern. And
we'll be moving the volunteer meeting, but we will be replacing that with a lot of coverage. We are just as a reminder, Cinegear will be happening this Friday and Saturday. We're going to be doing all the coverage in after hours for Friday, and then we'll have a show from 11 to 3 p.m. on Saturday. We're also going to have a get-together. So if you're watching this, we'll have a get-together. I'll be pushing the form up to Discord this morning to see if people are interested. But imagine it'll be in near the Paramount lots. We're not going to announce it in public, but near the Paramount lots is where we're going to do it. And so we'll be doing that on Thursday evening. So if you're interested in that, check out Discord, and you'll see a link to be able to sign up so we know how many people to get a reservation for. Traveled 105,000 miles in the Tlaloc Traversal. It's 169,000 kilometers, and that is 834 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
Makes me want to do these credits in USDZ just for fun. Oh, wouldn't that be great? Like the panel could just become this globe and we'd go inside of it. Like all the credits would just be around.
I think we should just do the text in with red and blue. Like we should just do
stereogram. Yes.
Stereo. We could just stereo text. That I think it's the future. Or we can have all the panelists. The new requirement is all the panelists have stereo cameras. I think that would be great. So we're all in 3D. So you can just put your goggles on, and it's not just like you see us in our house. You're like in the house. That would be amazing.
3D camera adds 100 pounds, though.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Here we go. Jumping to